I never thought I'd be writing this, but sometimes life takes unexpected turns. At 43, I found myself facing one of the hardest decisions of my life, whether to end my marriage of several years. The journey to this point wasn't sudden. It was more like watching a slow-motion train wreck while being unable to stop it. I've always tried to be a good provider for my family. My wife, 38, our two beautiful kids, 3 and 5, and even my mother-in-law. Looking back, I can say I gave it my all. While working 2 full-time jobs, one at a hospital with crazy hours and another at a retail store, I managed to complete my second bachelor's degree through online classes. It wasn't easy, but I wanted to give my family a better life than what I had growing up. My wife had her own dreams too. I supported her through her healthcare degree, and she had the potential to make good money, around $60,000 to $70,000 annually. But after our kids came along, she decided to be a stay-at-home mom. I understood and supported her choice. After finishing my master's degree, my career took off, and I started making enough, around $150,000 plus bonuses, to comfortably support our family. Seeing her struggle with the daily routine of managing the kids, I tried to make things easier. I hired a daytime nanny to help with our younger child while the older one was at school. My mother-in-law also lived with us and helped out. I thought this support system would help my wife cope better, but things just kept getting worse. My typical day started at 5:30 a.m. I'd get up, prepare the house, get our oldest ready for school, make breakfast, and handle the morning routine before heading to work. Even though I worked mostly from home managing global teams, I stayed busy with back-to-back meetings all day. But something wasn't right. Despite having help from both the nanny and her mother, my wife wouldn't start her day until around 10 a.m. She'd wake up, cook something, and then spend hours scrolling through her phone or shopping online. When I tried to talk about it, she'd get defensive and turn everything into a competition of who had it harder. If I had a rough day at work, she'd insist her day was worse because she was stuck at home. If my feet hurt from walking during business travel, she'd say it was nothing compared to standing and cooking with a child clinging to her. She'd occasionally tell me I had ruined her life and taken away her opportunities, but when I tried to discuss these accusations, she'd deny ever saying them. The emotional disconnect grew wider with each passing day. Even my mother-in-law noticed how I'd become closer to our kids and would even confide more in our dogs than my wife. I found myself in emotional survival mode, teetering between advancing my career and finding solace at the bottom of a whiskey bottle. I wasn't asking for much, just some appreciation, emotional support, maybe a hug now and then. But every attempt at connection was met with stories about how much harder her life was than mine. We tried getting her to go to therapy, both as a family and individually, but she always refused or found excuses to avoid it. The worst part? I still loved her. Despite everything, despite the temptations that came my way at work, I remained faithful because I believed we could fix things. But with each passing day, that belief grew weaker, and I found myself questioning everything about our relationship. Things came to a head when I finally gathered the courage to show my wife a post I'd written about our situation. Her reaction was exactly what I'd feared. She packed her bags and left to stay with her sister. At first, I thought maybe this break would help us both gain perspective, but I was wrong. The next day, she tried to take the kids with her to her sister's place. Thankfully, her own family stood against this idea. They understood it wouldn't be fair to uproot the kids and squeeze them into an already full house, especially since my wife wasn't working to contribute to the expenses. After about a week, she just walked back in like nothing had happened, like she was returning from a quick trip to the store. I was in the middle of an important work call when she came into my office, staring at me angrily. When I couldn't immediately end my meeting, it was a crucial quarter-end discussion, she exploded, screaming about how I didn't care about her well-being. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat in my office with my usual drink, a habit I developed to cope with the loneliness. She came in, and we talked, argued, cried, and eventually ended up in bed together. For a moment, I thought this might be our turning point. But the next morning, as we lay there, all she could talk about was how hard her time away had been staying in her old room, dealing with her sister's family, and how lucky I was to have it easy. My heart shattered that morning. Every attempt to discuss my own stress and anxieties was met with, "Do you know how hard this is for me? Or you're supposed to help me be happy?" When I tried to express my own need for happiness and support, her response cut deep. "We all have our problems. You need to figure it out and get over them." I started sleeping in my office or on the couch, sometimes with my kids in their bed after putting them to sleep. Nothing changed in her routine, still waking up at 10 a.m., scrolling through her phone, chatting in mom groups between cooking meals. while both her mother and our nanny handled the kids. The most painful realization was that during her absence, our daily routine hadn't changed much, except for ordering more takeout. I found myself trapped in a terrible dilemma. I couldn't just leave because I feared losing access to my kids, but staying meant continuing to smile through the pain. Looking back, there were warning signs I should have taken more seriously. After both pregnancies, she scored high on postpartum depression screenings, but she refused to see a therapist. That's why I brought in her mother and hired a nanny. I was trying to support her in any way I could. I wasn't ready to give up, even though every day felt like drowning in silence. I made contingency plans, talking to lawyers and drafting potential settlements, but I kept hoping she'd agree to therapy and we could work things out together. I endured it all for our kids, trying to maintain their sense of normalcy and ensure my mother-in-law's cancer treatments weren't interrupted. But sometimes hope isn't enough. After much pushing from our families, we finally tried marriage counseling. But like everything else, it turned into a blame game. In front of the therapist, she painted me as the villain who ruined her life. When the therapist asked her to recall when she was last truly happy, her answer knocked the wind out of me. 12 years ago, she said. That was when she was in her 20s, childless, living with her ex. The final straw came on Father's Day. Our families gathered for a barbecue, her parents, her sister's family, my mother, and our kids. While everyone tried to make it special, my wife treated it like any other day, sleeping in, occasionally cooking, mostly on her phone. She claimed she wasn't feeling well and sat around while everyone else helped make the day enjoyable. During dinner, I was talking with my brother-in-law about our kids' school Father's Day activities. I mentioned feeling sad seeing some kids sitting alone during the breakfast with dad event I'd attended. That's when she did it. She laughed loudly, making sure everyone could hear, and said, "It's not like you do anything anyway." I could have gone instead. The room went silent. I sat there, processing her words, when my mother-in-law broke the tension by suggesting maybe we should get divorced. My wife looked confused, then laughed mockingly while pointing at me, as if another woman would want a man like him. "Just look at you." I couldn't speak. In that moment, I felt angry, heartbroken, confused, and humiliated all at once. I just nodded, got up, grabbed my keys, and drove off to get a drink, trying to ignore our kids' cries for me to stay. When I returned early Monday morning, something had shifted. I went through my usual routine, waking up at 6 o'clock, getting our oldest ready for school, checking emails. As I got dressed to leave, I looked at my wife sleeping in our bed, snoring lightly, and realized everything we once had was gone. That morning, I texted my lawyer to move forward with serving her divorce papers. When she got served at home, she had a meltdown, screaming in my office about how I could do this to her. She accused me of turning her family against her. The irony was that she immediately switched to playing the perfect wife and mother for the rest of the week, but I knew it wouldn't last. It never did. I'm going for full, or at least majority custody of our kids. I'll continue covering all their expenses, insurance, private school tuition, medical bills, everything. Despite everything, I'm still helping with my mother-in-law's cancer treatments. Some might say I should cut ties completely, but having seen cancer's impact on families from both sides, I can't do that to them. My wife won't get alimony. Our state rarely enforces it, plus she has the means to work. To avoid problems, I'll cover her insurance and bills until either the divorce is finalized or she finds full employment. It's not the ending I wanted for our story, but sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. I've learned that love isn't always enough. Sometimes, no matter how much you give, how hard you try, or how long you wait, things just don't work out. But that doesn't mean you failed. It just means it's time to choose your own happiness, even if that choice feels impossible at first. The future is uncertain, but I know my kids and I will be okay. Sometimes, ending a chapter is the only way to begin a new one. And while this isn't the life I imagined, it's the life I need to embrace for my sake and for my children's.